Hey, weirdos, I'm Ash.
And I'm Elena.
And I'm Saruti.
And I'm Hannah.
And this is Morbid. But it's super duper special because we have our friends from Redhanded here today.
So excited.
We're so excited.
We're in, well, obviously Boston.
Yes.
But
You had to
we're
think
in
about it though, didn't you?
Yeah, I really did. Like this, because we're on tour at the moment, and the amount of times I've like gone out on stage and how I'll start the show is, but like, insert city, what's happening?
Like,
sometimes I'm like,
we?
is it Dallas or is it Houston?
Where did we leave from
Honestly,
this
I
morning?
I'd be like, we're here.
Yeah,
That's
we
all
only
that
have one
matters.
show left. We've got New York tomorrow, and then we're done.
We are
Yeah,
done.
Trage.
Are you ready to be done?
I would do this for the rest of my life, like
Really?
so
Love
happily.
that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I love the road. Saru, not so much.
You're like, I'm going home,
No.
getting in my comfy pants.
No, I'm like, look, we've been on the road for 27 days.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, that's great. Love meeting everybody. Excellent cities.
Right.
Having the best time. But I'm also like, I'd quite like to go back to my bed, back to my shower, and
Yes.
cook myself a meal in my own kitchen.
Oh,
It is
yeah.
not delivered to me in some sort of plastic carton
Yeah.
in my bedroom.
Yep.
So-
I'm such a homebody.
I was
that
going to
way.
say, we both are.
Oh my
Yeah.
God, do you want to hear the biggest tragedy in the world?
Yes.
So before the show yesterday, I ordered myself a very delicious sandwich, and it was so delicious that I was like, I'm actually too stressed to enjoy this right now. So I only ate a bit of it, and I was like, I'm going to take it back to the hotel, and I'm going to eat it later.
When I feel right.
You forgot it.
I left it at the venue.
No! The
See?
worst.
I know. So I'm running on Cheez-Its right now.
Oh, no.
Oh, that's terrible. Well, Mikey's on his way with a delicious spread.
Okay.
So once we're done with this recording, we can take a
Have a little
break and we'll
break.
have a little
I
spread.
cannot
you
wait.
know?
I'm
because
so pumped.
I have had this morning 4 pieces of yogurt covered raisins.
No!
And
Four
that is all.
individual
4
raisins.
individual yogurt covered raisins.
I had like 3 bites of my kid's leftover like waffle that she had already taken like 100 bites of, but I just quickly was like before I left. So that's what I'm running on.
I'm
right
not
now.
going to tell you guys what I had for breakfast because I had an awesome breakfast. So, moving
We're
on
like,
now.
We're goblins right now. And Ash is like, I don't know. I had a full
like, I'm
Food
fed.
Network breakfast here.
I literally did.
You did. You really did. She had avocado toast with a lot of garlic and onion on it. I'm gonna throw you under the bus.
And I made a little fruit salad.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
yogurt covered raisins, anyone? I have a box left.
If you guys hear a
Contagious.
strange grumble in the middle of this,
It is one of any of our stomachs.
collectively all of them, maybe.
Truly. But we're doing a really fun collab because I think we're like playing on the fact that I don't know if you guys noticed, but they're not from here. It's really hard to tell. They have awesome accents that I could listen to literally all day.
All day.
That's why I love your podcast for everything,
you.
but your voices are so soothing.
Oh, thank you. No one back home
it.
cares because they all sound like
I
this.
just like whatever.
So it's always fun to come here.
See, and we always get the like you have Boston accents, which are not like
They're not good accents.
they're not beautiful.
Yeah.
So like even people
not wicked
here are like
piss
you have some of the worst accents in this country.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that's true. I like the
Thanks.
Boston accent. Yesterday we were at the venue and the lovely old security guard, he like walked me back to the hotel.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, they walked
And I was
us. Yeah.
like, that's so sweet. And he had like a proper like,
Oh,
I am
yeah.
from Boston. And I'm not going to try do it because I'm terrible at accents.
That's like my dad's accent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I
That's
just wanted
like-
to give him a hug.
That's everyone's dad.
Yep.
That's what
Everybody's Boston
everyone's
dad.
here
Nice.
or grandpa here is the full Boston
I loved
experience.
it. I loved
Yeah.
it.
Oh yeah. Everyone knows a Sully.
Yep.
Everyone, you know.
Yep.
It's true.
A
it's
mix
all
something.
True. We are a stereotype. It's 100%.
We are, yeah.
But we figure what we would do is we're gonna do like a case. I've picked a really old case because those are always the most fun. I feel like They're just
Ideal.
you
We're
can
excited.
get, right?
Right.
You can get fun with these, and this is a super like. It has a lot of American
Juice
nonsense
to it.
Okay, perfect. I love
Essentially.
American nonsense.
Just nonsense, and the thing in itself. So we're going to be talking about Lavinia Fisher in the 6 Mile House.
Well, never heard of it.
I
Oh,
hadn't
good.
either before this.
I do.
So the cool thing about this is it's very American in and of itself because it's kind of exaggerated to the point of shenanigans.
I do.
Which I feel like is solidly American in and of itself, just exaggerated to shenanigans.
Sure is.
So she's known as America's first serial killer, or first female serial killer.
Oh, okay.
But she's not at all.
Oh.
Not even a little.
Spoiler alert.
She might not even be a murderer.
These are my
twist.
favorite type of cases.
Right? So this is like, it has urban legend in it. It has a lot of like the South, like before Civil War South in it, which is like eek and like woof. So there's that, and it's got highwaymen in it,
Oh,
like
cool.
highway robbery. I feel like it really fits the bill here. So this takes place in Charleston, South Carolina, which now is like beautiful and is on Southern Charm. On
Hell
Bravo.
yeah. I want to go there so badly.
Right?
I want to go there for my batch.
Real great. But it's a complicated tale, and this definitely begs the question, is this really the story of America's first female serial killer?
No.
Or is this a semi-true series of events exaggerated over time into a living urban legend of some sort?
Yes.
I'll take either.
My idea of it is it's probably exaggerated over time, but certain aspects are true, and they're interesting because she was a criminal. There was that. So the story of Lavinia Fisher unfolds against the backdrop of the pre-Civil War era. So it's 1815 to 1861-ish.
Long
so
ago.
like a little bit ago. Again, in Charleston, South Carolina. It was during a time of huge economic and social upheaval at this moment. Charleston was among the wealthiest cities of the British colonies and was a hub of imports and exports, and especially in the wake of the American Revolution. So because of this, it became one of the main entry points for several different trades, but also for enslaved people being forcibly brought into our country. And because it was close to the ocean, it became a base of operations for merchants in tobacco industries, cotton industry, all the huge industries at the time. So now at this time, and this is all to tell you why this all occurred. By the 1810s, the prosperity of Charleston was not as solid as it once was. It had happened to the other cities around too, that the Revolution and the War of 1812 had taken a serious financial toll on them. I don't know why Surrey is deciding to take me. Hold on.
Siri just popped up and she was like, I don't know what to tell
Siri's
you.
like, I didn't get that. Could you please, how do I get Surrey to stop?
Hit
Stop,
escape.
Surrey.
Escape. Even that? Oh, okay. That
Okay.
works.
Sorry. Surrey just took this over. All right. So this happened in Charleston, and the city's leaders worried about a total economic collapse, that it was going to be imminent at this time. Because of this, they feared the city would be, quote, reduced to a city of beggars, vagrants, thieves, and cutthroats.
Wow.
Right?
So Paris.
Yeah,
there
right.
you go. And they were thinking pirates. Pirates are just going to infiltrate
Okay. Right.
That's
into
fun.
these ports. And pirates were still a thing, but they weren't the pirates that we're probably picturing, like all high seas adventures and like rum jokes. Like that's what I picture as a pirate.
Jack Sparrow.
They were like scary as fuck. Like they were like
Like
real,
Captain Phillips.
yeah, like scary. And in the early 19th century, merchant ships definitely still were fearing attacks from pirates, who now were not sailing under the Jolly Roger Skull and Bones flag. They were sailing under flags of other countries to try to get through.
Okay.
To make matters worse, in 1819, Charleston was experiencing a big outbreak of yellow fever.
Oh,
And that
shit.
was requiring every ship that was coming into the city to be quarantined and inspected before even being allowed to dock at the port. So this was causing tons of delays, tons of complications for merchants, people being sent away. And with the city's port dealing with all of these crazy challenges and delays and the merchants getting angry, the wagon trade remained the most viable way of getting goods anywhere you needed to go in the South.
The good old Oregon Trail.
The Oregon Trail, which the actual game of the Oregon Trail, I don't know if you guys know it.
I've heard
Is
of
it
it.
where everyone dies of dysentery?
Yes,
Exactly. And you
Right.
can like buy oxen and
Okay.
forge a river.
So it's some sort of a really olden timey Wild West Monopoly.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a computer game, and it was like the earliest of all computer games. So it's like that green
so it's not a board game.
kind of screen. And we used to play it when we were little, and I'm not really sure why. Like, we thought it was such a cool game to be like,
We didn't
wow,
have
we're on the
Oregon
frontier,
Trail.
We're all dying of
dysentery.
diarrhea. Like, this is
Yeah, like rock on.
so fun.
Well, if it makes you feel better, guys, when I was a child, instead of playing the Oregon Trail, I was playing Planetary Taxi,
What is that?
What is
which
that?
is
An
the
excellent
greatest
question.
game. An excellent game, I think, is what it is. It was like one of those really old school PC games, probably a bit similar to what you're describing, but you were a taxi driver in space.
Oh,
In
that's
space.
epic. That's way better than
Exactly.
Oregon
Yeah,
Trail.
damn.
And it gets better. So people get in to the back, your potential customers, and they would be like, oh, I always get beaten by Farmer John in the fattest pig of the year contest. Take me to the planet where my pig will weigh the most. And then you had to figure out which planet had the greatest gravitational pull and then take him there. And if you got it right, he tipped you.
See, you were learning things. We were literally just dying from diarrhea. What is more American than that? Dying of diarrhea. Like, wow. You were traveling space
You were
and
looking
they
for
were-
the planet
but
with
they
the
were
greatest gravitational
doing
pull. Like,
math.
that
But they were trying to keep that, pioneering American spirit alive and well in the next
sure will.
generation.
That is
so
true.
I
They
get
sure
it.
will.
I get it.
You had to fix wagon wheels and shit. I was like, yeah, you went to a general store. You were like, I would like some grain.
See?
Yeah.
You
You
can't
know?
let those old traditions
You can't let
die
that-
out.
yeah, we
that
don't want that to
pioneer
die.
spirit.
Yeah,
Let
Forging
it
a
die
river.
at dysentery.
And that was always the thing. If you didn't die of dysentery,
Mm.
then you would go to the river and you were like, well, let's all take our lives in our hands. And every once in a while, you'd get across the river and you were like, Oregon. Oregon. Excuse me, they'll yell at us.
yeah, we got yelled
Oregon.
at by the actual game.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
you guys get yelled
Shut
at for
up.
mispronouncing places.
Oh,
in
Can you
the
imagine
US.
that?
All the
I
time.
mean, no, I did not imagine that.
Yeah.
So what is it? Oregon.
It's
It's
Oregon.
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 But I grew up calling it Oregon Trail.
And I
we
did
referred
too.
to Oregon as Oregon when we were little. I think it's a regional
Oregon.
dialect. I think that's just
Like
This
oregano.
is something I think about all the time. I'm like,
But
there's a
it's
difference
oregano. Or you
between
say, what? I'm confused.
mispronouncing
and regional dialect.
and saying something in your own accent.
Exactly.
Like Americans will call me Hannah, right? Like that's not my name. My name's Hannah. Do you know what I mean? But I'm not going to
Oh my
correct
God,
you.
that sounded exactly the same to me, though. I'm like, but is it Hannah?
How is it meant to be said in the Middle Eastern pronunciation?
Hannah.
So it's Hannah.
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 Short A. Hannah.
Guys,
Yeah.
we all sound like we're having breakdowns. Can we?
But this is the point. Like, I don't care. Like, just
Yeah.
just have an accent. That's fine.
At this
Right.
point, I've just changed my name to Susie QAnon, which is my American alias, by the way.
Love that
Susie
a lot.
Q Anon.
For when she gets randomly selected in every airport.
Oh no.
I love it. Well, that's like Massachusetts specifically has the most gnarly names for places.
Oh yeah.
Which we grew up just thinking that was normal, but when people try to say the names, they're like, what is
Like
that?
Gloucester.
I can't say the name of this state. It is one of
Massachusetts.
the ongoing jokes on Redhanded.
Can I
is that
hear you say it?
Massachusetts.
You
Yeah,
did
that's
it.
perfect.
Yeah, you
There
did
you
it.
go.
did it.
There we
You did
go.
it.
I
But
think I can now see it phonetically as it was
There you
spelled
go.
out by all of our listeners, and I can visually see it, so I say it that way.
You're like hitting each point.
But
I
that's
love
the
it.
problem with most of the cities around here is like phonetically they make literally no sense.
None. I do.
Like Worcester makes no. It looks
But
like
that's very
Worcester.
English, though.
Yes,
Like,
that's
we
very
have a
English.
Worcester, we've got a Gloucester, we've got a Leicester.
Yes,
you know?
we do.
No,
In fact,
see,
we
you
have
guys
a
get it.
Leominster, we have a Peabody.
brilliant. My favourite tweet will always be, what's the hardest thing you've ever had to tell anybody? And people were like, oh, when I had to call my sister and tell her that our father had passed away. And somebody just wrote, Worcestershire sauce.
Yep, that's been a hot debate on our show. Worcestershire
Worcestershire
sauce.
sauce.
Yeah.
Because that's how you say it.
That's how you say
How,
it.
how else would
I
one
don't
say.
know.
Worcester.
Worcestershire, Worcester. People
Prison,
say it.
no.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Prison.
Yeah, truly. That's another very American thing. We just yell at each other about like saying things for no reason. Like we
Yes.
just can't let each other say things. the
We've
way
been
we
on the
say it.
receiving end of that,
Yeah.
don't worry.
Yeah.
It's definitely a thing. I would
Anytime you
say.
put your voice anywhere, people are bound to just scream at
Yeah.
you. You know?
Seems like
It's all good. Let's do
Oh,
some
we
more of
know.
it.
Yeah, let's keep going.
Let's go. Yeah, so let's go back to the 1800s. 1800s, which was such a fun time in
Let's
America.
all get dysentery
Let's
together.
get some yellow fever. Yeah, get robbed by a highwayman or woman.
Meet a
Doesn't matter.
pirate.
Yeah, meet up. That sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, you know, if you
I
make
feel like
it out
they're
to tell the
assholes,
tale,
but, like, feels cool.
you could yo-ho with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's just what you do.
And I do
That's how
love
you
a
get
rum
through
and
it.
Coke.
You
Yeah.
do.
So-
A pirate's life for you.
There you
There
go.
you go. Ahoy.
Stick a lime in it, no
There
scurvy.
you go.
We're off.
So, here we go. So we're in on the wagon trade now because that's the only way that we can get anywhere. Otherwise, everything sucks. You're going to get robbed by a pirate. You're going to get delayed at port.
Phenomenal.
Everything's going to suck. But even though it was now keeping Charleston's economy afloat, it wasn't nearly as efficient as ships were. For one, horses, they get tired. And they need to sleep.
They get
They
dysentery.
need to eat. They get dysentery. They drown in a river if you try to forge it. Too early, I guess. I don't even know what the reasoning for drowning in the river in Oregon Trail was. It was just like
I think just cause.
it was just a crapshoot.
yeah,
It was
you
like,
don't know how
oh,
to swim.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm like, who's getting swimming lessons on the Oregon Trail?
Exactly, you know?
Yeah. Oh, if you were in the river, you were gone.
Yeah, you're
like that
fucked.
was it. Like no one swam. It
There was
just,
rapids.
whoops. Yeah.
Yeah.
All the wheels went out, and you were like, oh, well, there that goes. But yeah, that's what happened. So horses need to rest. They need to eat. And while some traveling merchants had no problem sleeping in their wagon, and they could do that without getting robbed or murdered, the journey was often hundreds of miles, and the driver, not to mention any occupants that they had with them, would need to find some kind of shelter at various points along the route, especially for storms, weather, all that good stuff. This gave rise to, quote, stage taverns or inns known just as houses.
Ah, like a public house.
Exactly. Exactly. And those were along the outskirts of major cities where travelers could stop for a night, rest, water their horses, water themselves,
AKA shower.
There you go. But like the shipping industry, the wagon and stage trade came with a ton of fears, not about pirates anymore, but now about being robbed or having an entire wagon or coach be stolen right out from under you. So in the early decades of the 19th century, Charleston, South Carolina was not so different from the other colonies around. It was always walking a line between the pre-revolution wilderness of the past and the industrial, socially complicated society that was going to be on its way in the latter half of the 19th century. But it was ruled by economic opportunity mixed with intense fear of any kind of change.
Sure.
So things weren't great. It was one of those very unstable at that moment. So let's get to the legend or urban legend of Lavinia Fisher. So Lavinia and John Fisher, they were married and had lived much of their lives in or around Charleston. When they were in their mid to late 20s, the couple operated an inn that was referred to as the 6 Mile House, along with what was known, it was on Meeting House Road. So the name 6 Mile House was basically the mile marker that it was
Clever.
on. It would indicate to travelers how far you were from the city.
Nice.
So other inns had names like 5 Mile House, 4 Mile House.
Imagine that.
You can see where that's going.
Half Mile House.
I would want to be like 1 Mile House.
Yeah.
Like we're number 1. That's what I would want to do. 6 is like, eh. But these houses offered travelers and merchants a place to stop and rest, get food, water, and overnight stay. And if they as they traveled into Charleston to sell their goods, or as they traveled out, that's where they would stop along this way. So travelers leaving the city would be, as John Ralphio in Parks and Recreation would say, flush with cash. And this made them pretty easy prey. I had to.
You can never
You
like
can't let
get
that
around
happen.
that. No.
But this made them very easy prey for highwaymen, or in this case, highwaywomen. So the legend has it that Lavinia would lure in guests with her seductive wiles. Everybody.
I mean, her name's Lavinia. She
She's
must
a
be kind of
lady.
hot.
It is a hot girl name.
Right?
It is.
Lavinia, I'm like, you have to be good looking.
You do.
Right?
I feel like she was.
Yeah.
And
Hopefully.
not only would she lure them in with her womanly wiles, but then she would double down and cook them a home-cooked meal.
And that's the way
sold.
to any man's heart, you know?
And then she would sedate them with warm tea.
Oh my god.
I mean, I kind of fancy her now.
But unfortunately, that warm tea was poison.
There's always a catch.
Yeah. You can't
No
get
one's
it
a
all.
10 out of 10.
Yeah, you can't
Yeah.
get it with both hands. It's just something's going to happen.
We'll knock off like 2 points.
yeah, it's
She's an
like-
8.
She still sounds great, to be honest. But
She's a pretend, but she will poison you.
Exactly. Take it or leave it, boys. Now, some say once their victim was unconscious or asleep, John would sneak into the room, he would rob them, and he would murder them. But then it's said that he, quote, butchered them and disposed of their bodies in their cellar.
Oh, tag
Oh,
team.
very bloody benders.
Thank you. I bring them up,
You're
actually.
welcome.
In the next paragraph. Actually.
Okay.
But there are some variations in this story, though. Another slight variation is that once they were definitely unconscious, Lavinia would open a trap door beneath the victim, and they would drop into the basement, which I like better.
Like in Sweeney Todd.
Yes,
Oh,
exactly.
yes.
Sweeney Todd.
Hello.
And that's where they would be ultimately murdered. And in some versions, they even say that beneath that trap door, Lavinia herself, which I'm like, whoa, Lavinia, had positioned spikes at the bottom of a pit, which impaled the victims as they landed.
Now she's going
Efficient.
Miss Trunchbull route.
I'm saying that's her,
Damn.
like the ultimate chokey down
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
And they're
But-
already dead when they get spiked.
Yeah,
So
just-
it's just for the fun of it.
Just for the fun
Just
of
so
it.
she can, like,
Which
see.
is very bloody benders, because we're going to get into them, and they did do that shit just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that got tainted, like a little bit of bloody benders got mixed in with this story. We do that a lot. But John and Lavinia were said to have, quote, a great number of skeletons found in the cellar of 6 Mile House. Later it was said that they had a cellar full of human bones. So it's getting
Oh.
bigger and bigger as we go. It's like maybe one, and then it's like a whole ass cellar of
I
human
love it.
bones.
It starts vague,
Yeah.
just gets bigger.
It's like maybe she just like
A great
robbed
many.
people, and it's like no, she was impaling them on spikes under her kitchen. It's like
Duh.
how did that happen?
It's just someone telling a story in one of those houses, and they're like,
Absolutely.
I'm not getting the reaction I need.
So they were
Nobody
like-
cares.
there was spikes
Listen up.
impaled right under our feet like that. I would have done
And she was a stone cold hottie.
it. So I mean, her name's Lavinia. She's
What could
gonna
you
make you tea.
expect?
She's gonna cook you dinner. So you choose whether you're coming in. But like we just mentioned a bunch of times, it is very reminiscent of the Bloody Benders. We actually covered the Bloody Benders a long time. I'm actually going to redo that one.
Yeah,
That's one of those that I remember doing in our living room. So that was an
Yeah.
early one.
Oh,
We
yes.
have a few of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We know the feeling well.
Yeah. I just end up being like, oop, gonna take that one back and redo that better. Because
Yep.
it's a gnarly story, and I think we could definitely. I think it was only like an hour-long episode, maybe, that we did on it.
Yeah, if
And I
that.
think this could be like several episodes of the Bloody Benders now. I'm like, what was I doing?
Bloody Benders take 2.
Yeah, they were an American family of murderers, like an actual family
Wow.
of just straight-up serial killers, like kids and
Wow.
all.
Yeah.
And it's real.
And it's real. In
I've
Kansas.
heard of this, but
Yeah.
we've never covered it. But it kind of reminds me of like, there's lots of fake stories like that in the UK. There's the Sawney Bean clan
Oh, I've heard
That
about
sounds familiar,
in
yeah.
Yeah.
Scotland. They were kind of the inspiration for like The Hills Have Eyes
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
stuff.
makes sense.
So they were like meant to be in Scotland, this family of like cannibalistic, incestuous people living in these caves, like attacking people that walk past them and cannibalizing them. The kids were there, all sorts of grisly stuff. If you look it up, it is dark. And then you realize actually it was just anti-Scottish English propaganda.
Yeah.
Are you serious? Oh no.
Like just these Scottish people living in caves.
They're like, they're
Jumping out and
disgusting
eating
over
people.
there.
Yeah, they're like, they are having sex with each other and they will eat you.
It is absolutely true. Don't look further into it. Just listen to what I'm saying.
Avoid the caves.
No, we definitely have a few of those, like, that you know are fake, that are like this whole family of cannibals. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, but the Bloody Benders,
That's for real.
they were
Wow.
real.
Wow.
They really did it. And it was in the early 1870s. And it was in Kansas. And they had, which, like, it kind of fits, like, at that time in Kansas. Like,
Yeah.
Like, at that time, like, frontier family.
Sure,
of just
sure.
Like, we're going to murder people. Like, everyone was probably mad there in 1870. But they had, like, a bed and breakfast, air quotations, that they would lure people into and then brutally murder them. And they had a trap door that led into their cellar. And they would position the victim sitting over the trap door. And then I think it was like, it really is reminiscent of it because the wife would like kind of distract whoever the victim was.
Yeah.
And then the husband or one of the sons would come up behind them, slit their throat, or hit them on the head with a hammer. And then boom, they would go into the trapdoor.
Oh, wow.
And
Wild.
often they would be robbed of whatever they had on them. That was usually because they would lure like wealthy people in that were like traveling through. But sometimes they would just do it for the thrill of it.
Wow.
Like they would not get a wealthy person, and they were like, "Well, we're just gonna."
Oh,
kill
look,
them
we're
anyway.
just bored.
Yeah.
What else
Yeah.
is there to do in Kansas in the
Exactly.
1870s?
1870s. It's dusty.
I was literally thinking
I
that.
bet there's tornadoes. Yeah, Kansas has
There was a
tornadoes.
dust
Was that
bowl.
yeah,
Wizard
was that the
of Oz,
Dust
that
Bowl?
was a
Sure.
tornado. Yeah.
Totally.
Why
Dust
not?
bowl.
We're educated.
It's a bowl of dust. I know it. So.
We know what happened.
Yeah. But they were real. They were able to confirm all the deaths. They were able, like, people who did escape the bloody benders with their lives were able to be like, oh, yeah, they tried to hit me in the head with a hammer. And I saw a trapdoor. Like, they were able to be like, yeah, that's literally what
Wow.
happened.
Nice.
So this definitely has a little bit of that infused in it. And since it's around the 1800s, it's like, I think maybe it kind of layered on top of each
Yeah.
other. And because Lavinia is a woman and there was a woman in the Bloody Benders, I think they were like, let's have another one of those.
Redo.
We can't just have one. But in early tellings of this story, John and Lavinia Fisher are described as, quote, pleasing in appearance.
Okay.
You
so
gotta
they're
be.
hot.
You gotta be.
You know, John and Lavinia? Yeah.
I
They're
felt
hot.
like they were an it couple.
For sure.
Yeah.
They are. And they knew how to give the weary traveler such a welcome as made him feel the inn was more like a home than a public resort.
Was it the trapdoor that like, made it feel homey?
I think it was the spikes that you land on. It just feels like home.
Except the ambiance of
Yeah,
it all.
you know?
It was the lovely rug over the
Exactly.
trapdoor
They were like,
and the
"This is
spikes.
beautiful." But the Fishers weren't only praised for their resort and their loveliness, but also for their food, which was apparently described as excellent fare for man and beast.
Wow.
So
Get
they're
some and give it to your dog.
Yeah. I always want to hear about my cooking. Whenever my husband's like, "This is delicious," I'm like, "What a beast!" It's really. Can we get a beast in here? This isn't enough. But later, however, the entire area around 6 Mile House is described as a haven for, quote, gangs of white desperados who occupied certain houses and infested the roads leading to the city. White desperado. Huh. I'm just picturing that.
I know.
Man. But it is said that travelers passed these houses with fear and trembling.
Oh no.
Because it was just bad guys.
I hate
everywhere.
that.
And the more dreaded than any of the other of these haunts was known as 6 Mile House, occupied by John Fisher and Lavinia. So the legend tells listeners that the robberies and missing travelers went on for more than a year, until finally the bandits were located in the neighborhood of 5 and 6 Mile Houses, then traced to the houses themselves, and the situation came to head when a young man, hatless and coatless.
Oh,
no.
Whoa.
Excuse me. How are you meant to tell if he's a good guy or a bad guy? He hasn't got a hat on.
If you are hatless and coatless.
And coatless.
Exactly.
Oof.
It's
Excuse
quite
me.
hot in Charleston, though, isn't
I
it?
know, it is.
Wicked.
Yeah.
Almost as hot as in this room.
So you would think, I know, right? Can you feel it? But it's like if I saw him hatless and coatless, I'd just be like, well, it's warm.
Yeah,
Back
right.
then, they were like, you are either a
You're a
victim of a
vagabond.
crime or you are a desperado. I don't know. There's nothing in between. And he was riding into town hatless and coatless.
How dare he?
Dare he?
Right?
How dare he? And he was frantically seeking the sheriff. So the man told authorities that he had been attacked.
Oh no.
And that those who had set upon him, he said, were no less persons than the man and woman who kept 6 Mile House. I don't know if you remember, but that is John and Lavinia Fisher.
I knew
A
it.
likely story. I feel like this is just a cover up because he's turned up drastically underdressed to this
Exactly.
town. And
So
he's
he's
like,
like-
oh, I was robbed.
I have to explain this. So the man says, he claims that he had seen the Fishers on the previous night going through his belongings, and he had heard them make mention of having to attend to him the following morning.
Uh-oh.
So he got out of there, which I think was a little hasty because they do run a bed and breakfast. So if they were like, we should attend to our guests tomorrow, he's like, they're going to murder me. Okay. Like, he just left.
He caught a vibe.
Yeah, he
But
did.
it's either a really good thing or a really bad thing.
I know. Maybe he just has a better intuition than I do.
Yes.
I know,
would've
trust
been
your
like,
gut.
They're going to give me a continental breakfast. That's nice of them.
I know, if there's the promise of breakfast, you're going to stick around.
Yeah, I'm not leaving, so I'm going to fight through it if there's breakfast involved.
We spent all day yesterday telling people to trust their gut on the episode. And today
Yeah,
you're
we
like,
did.
I don't know about that.
Today I'm like, except if there's breakfast.
Not a continental, though. That's not good enough.
It's really
No.
not.
Cooked breakfast.
Yes.
Homemade.
If I can have it
Exactly.
like in bed,
Sure.
straight
on a
up,
nice tray.
on a tray,
With a trapdoor under it.
with a trapdoor,
fresh
even
juice.
if there's spikes, as long as I can have like buttermilk pancakes
Delightful.
sitting in bed.
Yeah,
with nice
right
coffee.
before you die.
Yeah, that's all I need.
Yeet it into the trapdoor.
That's all that I need. So the sheriff went to 6 Mile House that day, and he drove the band of robbers out, including John and Lavinia Fisher. And he left a man on site to ensure that these bandits did not return. So he was just like, get out of your own house. And this guy's going to stay here and make sure that you don't. And when they did, the man went for the law again because they came back. They were like, we're not, you left one guy. I'm
and like
Lavinia
many people.
And John Fisher. You left one guy, we're coming back in. So he went back to the sheriff again, who at this time finally apprehended the entire gang and confiscated 10 muskets, some pistols, knives, and a large canister of powder from the house.
A large canister of powder.
Was it powdered sugar for pancakes?
No.
That's the question. I don't think so.
They don't specify.
That was going in the tea.
that was going in the tea. So the Fishers were found guilty of highway robbery, and they were sentenced to hang.
This escalated so quickly.
It did. It
I feel
definitely
like
did.
there was a lot of build up to this, that the sheriff wasn't taking any notice of anything that was going on at 6 Mile House, and then suddenly they're like, we need to hang them.
Yeah, suddenly that's another part of this that is very, especially old-timey American, which was just like, you should die. Like, let's just like
Even just being a hangman, a highwayman was a hangable offence.
Yeah.
In where I went to school, there's like a little, like a tiny little pyramid in the middle of a field, and it marks the last highwayman to ever be hanged.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's in Hemel Hempstead.
Oh,
That's so
crazy.
wild.
The only reason to go to Hemel Hempstead.
there is an aqua splash there.
Yeah, where it was voted Britain's ugliest town.
But there is
What
a
a nice owner.
But there is a very good water park
Yes,
there
exactly.
called Aqua Splash.
So let's go, guys.
Let's go. It
Go
has
see
that.
the historical of it all and then go for the aqua.
I just want to see that little pyramid.
It's like this big, and it's just in the middle of a field.
Oh my God, that's
Yeah.
so wild.
That is cool.
Those kind of things are always crazy to me. Like in Salem, we have all those little memorials, and they're always like these small little things that are like, this gnarly thing happened
Yeah.
here. And
Yeah,
you're like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's all you have? Like, what?
No, it's true, but
It's wild.
we're full of them, as you guys must be in Boston, because like we've been going around and we're like, it's like the first place that feels like really, really historic.
Oh,
of
yeah.
where we've been.
Boston's historical as fuck.
And I used to work where I used to work in London. It was like in a really boring part. I used to work near St Catherine's Dock, but I'd get off the tube and walk to my office, and it was past like what was it, Tower of London?
Tower, yeah.
of London. And there's just a sign on my way to work that'd be like, this is where Anne Boleyn was beheaded.
Stop.
And then
That-
all these tourists just taking pictures of it, and I'm like, I'm just trying
I'm
to get
late.
past with my friends.
Excuse me.
But this is where this is where Anne Boleyn was beheaded.
That is
Wow.
wild to me.
They also have, I don't know how familiar you are with the cinematic masterpiece Pocahontas 2.
Actually, weirdly pretty familiar. Her kids love that movie.
So, you know, like when they go to town, they go through Traitor's Gate, right?
Yes,
and they're
of
on the
course
little
I do.
boat. So, like, Traitor's Gate is still there. So
No
you
way.
so you just walk right past it, and it's just the gate on the Thames, and it just says Traitor's Gate above it.
Oh my God.
Oh my god!
Yeah.
I think
That
you
is
guys should come
wild.
to London.
I
and we'll
think
just
so
take you on a
also.
It's
walking
on the
tour.
bucket list. I'm dying to
Come.
go.
We will
Dying
do
to
this in
go.
a hot studio there as well, and
Oh,
we'll
we
take you on a
have
walking
Let's
tour.
do it.
We did a 5-parter on Jack the Ripper, and
you
I
did?
was like entrenched in it. I was like, I have to go.
She's dying to go to
You
Whitechapel.
must come. We're
I'm
both
ready to,
East
like,
London
solve
as
it.
well.
We're East London
hell
girls,
yes.
yeah.
God.
We gotta come.
Okay, we'll talk about this.
We gotta.
off air.
We're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. I'm solving that case.
Let's go.
I'm telling you, that's my lifelong ambition.
one
Yeah,
of
you
the-
and
it's one of the
Tobias.
royals,
Me
right?
and Tobias from Ghost are gonna solve it. It is hot in here.
Oh, God. What have I done?
So yeah, the Fishers were found guilty of highway robbery. They were sentenced to hang. They sat in their cells for nearly a year, waiting on a pardon for their execution. And apparently when John was visited by a local priest, he was very contrite. He wanted his soul to be saved. But Lavinia, she had no interest in salvation. She really only cared about being pardoned. It never came.
Oh, no.
When the day finally came, John begged his wife to make peace with her God, but she absolutely refused, to not one word of religious instruction would she listen.
That's like kind of badass. Not gonna
Especially
lie.
back
I love
then.
that.
I feel like especially back then, that was like
Yeah.
straight up rebellion.
Yeah.
Now, when their execution finally arrived, apparently Lavinia had to be dragged from her cell while she shrieked and raved like, quote, one insane. Which I'm like, was she insane or was she just about to be hanged in front of a crowd?
You decide.
Like, I don't know. I might shriek as well.
Yeah, maybe.
I don't think a lot of us could be like stoic in that moment. But some say Lavinia and her husband were dressed in white outfits as they made their way to the gallows, like matching white outfits. While other variations insist that Lavinia was wearing her wedding dress.
Stop it. No, she wasn't. No, she was not.
And when she finally reached the gallows, Lavinia blurted out profanities from the gallows, which I think is pretty
love
badass. And before famously shouting, if you have a message you want to send to hell, give it to me. I'll carry it. Which is
Lavinia.
Bad bitch.
You just want like a guitar riff.
Yeah.
Like this. I was like,
For
holy
real.
shit.
She's going on tour after this.
She is. But some say Lavinia even cheated the hangman at one moment by jumping from the platform before being
Hell
wrestled
yeah.
back into position
What?
just above her own trapdoor and then hanged with John. So to this day, it's said that Lavinia's ghost haunts the grounds that once held the old city jail, where she was held for nearly a year before her execution. Others say she haunts Charleston's Unitarian Cemetery. And whatever the case, her spirit is believed to still, quote, roam and haunt the last areas she knew and where she felt most unsettled in her life. So that's the story. But here's the real story of what happened.
She was a nice lady.
Lavinia was a school teacher. She retired at the age of 30. No.
At the age of 30.
Yeah, back then she was like,
Oh, yeah,
really?
that's true. That's true.
So not a lot is really known about the Fishers before their arrests in actuality, but for all intents and purposes, their story begins in the winter of 1819. In response to the rise in highwaymen robbing people, that was happening all the damn time, there were lynch mobs that were formed, and they were basically the one bringing justice outside of the law to these random highwaymen. Of course, we know this was often a legit act of terrorism masked as justice.
Yeah.
So, frustrated by the ongoing attacks on travelers and merchants on Meeting House Road, on February 16th, 1819, a heavily armed mob assembled and rode from Charleston in the direction of 5 Mile House.
Oh, damn.
They had received word that a gang of thieves, who was responsible for a string of highway robberies near Ashley Ferry, had holed up at one of the houses, and they were determined to smoke them out and bring them to justice. According to author Bruce Orr, which we will make sure we give
Link.
a little reference in the show notes for his book, the mob allegedly had permission from the owners of several small houses in the area to proceed as they saw fit. Which I don't know if I believe that.
I was going to say, I doubt that.
They're like, they said it was fine if we murdered these people, okay? So
They said to do whatever we wanted while
that
we were
house
here.
said it was fine if we lit this one on fire. So talk to someone else. I don't know. Now, among the many obvious problems with mob justice is that lynch mobs tend to lack information and objectivity. Instead,
This is a really reasonable lynch mob, actually.
really-
And we have a really thought out opinion.
we have cited sources of what happened. Instead, they really only operate on reactionary emotions and just collective outrage.
That'll
usually.
do it.
That's usually the case. No one's taking a step back and really thinking in these cases. So in the case of the attacks along Meeting House Road, none of the victims who reported being attacked or robbed could actually identify any of their attackers. So when the mob arrived at 5 Mile House, they had no idea who they were looking for.
What?
They were just going in there being like, I guess we just take everyone in the house. That's
Good
probably
to get
who did
swept
it.
up before you know what's happening.
It's
Yeah.
always good to act first and then go, oops, later.
You don't want to be the last person joining the mob.
Yeah.
Then
no,
it just looks like you
exactly.
jumped on the bandwagon.
Precisely. They're working off the mantra of you ask for forgiveness, not permission. So we'll deal with it. It's fine. We're
My
just going with
favorite
it.
kind of people.
Yeah, I'm not asking. So nevertheless, when they entered the inn, the mob found a small group of individuals assembled inside, and regardless of whether they were the actual aggressors or robbers, the group was instructed to grab whatever personal belongings they had near them and get the hell out of the house immediately. Likely pretty confused and startled by the appearance of a giant violent mob at their house, the group of 5 Mile House protested a little bit. And they resisted a little bit because they were like, what the fuck is happening right now? So the mob was like, okay. And they just lit the building on fire.
Oh, shit.
They were like, we gave you a chance. Burned to the ground in a very small period of time. People got out, but they burnt it to the ground with people in it.
And
Is this one Lavinia's house?
No, this is next to Lavinia's
Oh,
house.
okay,
This is
okay.
like
5
down
mile.
the way.
Oh,
this is
okay.
5 mile.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So the mob was like, well, that worked really well because now the house
everybody
is
got
gone.
out.
We burnt that house
we got
right down.
everybody out. So they were like, all right. So they moved a little further up the road, hoping to dole out some justice to 6 Mile House as well.
Here we go.
So the proprietors of 6 Mile House and the visitors of 6 Mile House actually listened and complied.
You would.
I'm wondering if they saw, like, I don't know, the smoke
Yes.
rising
Yeah.
from 5 Mile House.
Maybe smelled a little something.
Or maybe it was the actual lynch mob that was at their door that they were like, we should leave.
Who can
let's
say?
just leave.
Combination platter.
We'll figure,
There
like,
you go.
this was smart. They took context clues. They put the problem solving, and they were like, this is going to end badly for us. We should leave.
Yeah.
So they got out. Either way, they left. And to make sure they didn't return, they did that old standby where they just leave one guy standing at the door
Oh, good.
to keep the entire house out.
The entire lynch mob, too.
Yeah, exactly. So
It's worked well in the past.
It has, obviously. So it works for 6 Mile House. So they left a guy named David Ross at 6 Mile House, and they said, don't let them back in.
I don't know if I
they
trust
come
him.
here. I don't know about David Ross.
No.
I feel bad for David Ross.
I don't know if I would pick, like, David.
No, I feel like I could
Out of the
overpower
group.
David Ross.
I don't know what name I would choose.
I've been thinking
Harold.
about names a lot while
Right.
we've been talking about this. I feel like there are hot guy names, hot
Yeah.
girl
Oh, yeah.
names. There are like strong names.
Yep.
What's the hottest hot guy name if it's not John?
I was going to say, because
You're
I'm
biased.
partial to a John.
A partial to a
Oh,
John.
John's my
my
dad's
husband's
name.
name.
Yeah.
Oh, see, you gotta sit this one out. I like Andrew, personally.
Oh, Andrew is a great name.
You know, I'm a little biased.
Do you know a Drew at all? I don't. Marrying one in October? maybe?
No, never that.
But I would say hot guy names.
Hot guy names, I don't know. Most guys are not that hot, so. I don't know.
I've always thought maybe it's because of The Little Mermaid. Is his name Eric?
Eric?
Are you kidding?
Eric, quite a
I feel
hot
like
guy
Eric
name.
is
I know,
n-
he's such a prick in
He
hindsight.
is such a prick.
No.
What was Pocahontas's? Oh, John.
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 John Smith.
John.
It always comes
And then
back
John
to a
Rolfe.
John.
Yeah.
There you go.
See, I'm a Princess and the Frog girly, and Naveen.
Naveen.
Naveen's a hot
Naveen.
guy.
Yeah,
Naveen
okay,
is out,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. You can
Yep.
have that.
But I would say
Settled.
the hottest. Who's the hottest Disney prince?
Obviously, General Shang.
Oh yes.
Oh,
There we go. All right. Let's end the conversation.
Truly.
Hottest
Yes.
hot boy name, Shang.
We figured it out.
We've cracked the code.
We do. And actually, while we're on tour, people ask us, what are your like pre-show rituals? Our only pre-show ritual, apart from watching 90 Day Fiancé in our dressing rooms, is listening to Mulan, I'll Make a Man Out of You,
Oh
before
my
we go
God,
on stage.
incredible.
You guys
yes.
can have it.
I-
We're swapping
I need
hats
that.
here. Have it.
Wow.
Because that'll get you fired up.
Oh yeah, we save it for occasions where we need to get especially hype.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
my kids
genius.
love, one of my kids especially, one of my twins is obsessed with Mulan. Like,
Thanks
that's,
to me.
And it is thanks to Ash.
It's the
my
best one.
favorite movie.
It's
It
my
is so
favorite.
good.
It's
And
my
she
favorite Disney movie.
Loves that song. And when she was like 2, she used to be like, let's get
down to business.
And I was like, hell yeah, defeat the Huns. Like, let's go.
You get him.
Yeah.
Then it gets like super like not feminist at all.
I'm like singing it to them. I'm like, we'll make a man out of you. Then I'm like women.
Did they give us daughters? And like, yeah, they did. They
they
did give you
did.
daughters. Who gives a fuck what you asked for?
As long as you do that while you sing it.
But
Yeah, you
she's
just side
fighting
notes.
it. She's fighting
Hell
it.
yeah, she is.
Fight the patriarchy.
Badass. That's why we love Princess and the Frog in our house too, because like she's the best. Tiana's like,
Tiana's
I'm opening
bad
up a
bitch.
restaurant. Fuck all y'all. I'm like, yes. Hell yeah.
Beignet, anyone?
I love her. So David Ross, David is not, to me, the guy I would leave. I don't know why. It just doesn't
I know what
feel
you mean.
right.
I know what you mean.
Right? If there was a John around, I'd be like, John, stay over there.
So it's like, are there any doctors here?
Or
Are there any
Philip.
Johns here?
Exactly.
We need a John.
Philip,
And they're-
I feel like, is like a
It's a solid name.
little solid. Not Phil, but Philip.
Philip.
Mm.
William.
William.
I would trust a
Feels a
William.
little...
Yep.
Harry,
Feels old
Harold.
and timey.
Never trust a Harry.
No, we don't trust the Harrys anymore.
Okay.
We
No,
don't
no,
trust
no.
him.
Bye,
We
Harry.
don't trust Harry.
Except Harry Styles.
Always Harry
Right?
Styles.
Oh no, even him.
Oh, no! I was going to say she loves Harry Styles.
I do.
I was like, do we trust Harry Styles?
I feel like that's a story for a later time.
After Don't Worry, Darling, I don't trust him. The way.
What was his name in that?
Hard agree.
Forgot.
I think
Jack.
his name was John.
Jack.
Or
Jack.
Jack, so kind of.
Yeah, don't
John.
trust him.
Yeah. So there's that.
Well, those are names.
Well, they should have left Shang. Instead, they left David. And they told him, you let us know if anyone returns, which this was kind of my favorite thing because it's like instruct us, like, or alert us if somebody returns. And it's like, but they didn't have like a cell phone or a walkie-talkie. So it's like jump on your horse and ride like miles into town to be like, hey, they're there.
let us know.
They came back. It's like, I don't think that's going to help. But sometime later, David Ross returned to Charleston pretty frantically because he was like, shit, I have to alert you. He was asking for the sheriff. And in his sworn testimony later, Ross said he was the one that was hatless and coatless. That was
Not
David.
him.
Immediate red flag.
I'm saying. He said that shortly after 9 p.m., a man named William Hayward, one of the men who'd been forced out of 6 Mile House by the mob, he had returned to the inn and he had, quote, cursed him, collared him violently, and pushed him out.
How dare he?
So William, but like, how dare he? Because William's like, this is my fucking house. Like, get out.
Oh, so dare he?
So he came in and he collared that guy out and he was like, David, get out of here.
Okay.
I'm coming back in my house. So he did. And then he slammed the door in his face. He was very careful to say that.
That's
He
his door.
Slammed the door in his face.
Yeah.
So when David Ross went back into the house, and I love this because he's like, David goes into the house that doesn't belong to him, that he was just thrown out of. He goes back in and he asks Hayward, hey, can I get a couple of my things that I had here?
No, get out of
Before I
here.
leave. And Hayward apparently put his hands into his bosom and said, you damned infernal rascal. If you lay your hand on anything, I will blow your brains out.
I am only going to call people damned infernal
rascals.
But you
okay.
have to touch their bosom, as you said.
Yeah.
No, I don't know about that.
I mean,
That's where I draw the line.
it's
You
the
have to
rules.
put your hand
Embosom them.
into his bosom.
I don't know about all
Must do
that.
that.
Not just on.
Yeah,
Into. Enter the bosom.
Like, how do you become one with someone's bosom in that
Full
moment?
send.
I mean, we'll find out when you eventually
When
do
you
it.
do it.
I'll let you guys know.
You are going to do it. But after being rebuffed by Hayward a second time, Ross was surprised to find that more of the people from 6 Mile House were now returning and were like, we're just going to come back into our house. Specifically, John and Lavinia Fisher, as well as 2 other men that Ross didn't recognize. So Ross claimed that at that point, Lavinia Fisher, quote, Lavinia herself, laid violent hands upon him, choked
She said,
him.
catch these hands.
Look at David.
They're coming for your bosom.
She was. She came for his bosom. She choked him and then pushed his head through a glass window.
Shit.
Lavinia
She's got no
does
chill.
not fuck around.
She has no chill.
She was
But
like,
that's what
"How dare
happens.
you?"
What's that like horribly offensive chart that people post on Twitter where they're like how hot she is versus how crazy she is? Lavinia's
That's
a
what
10.
it is. She's a 10
on
on
both. 10,
It's
10.
true. She's going to throw your head through a glass window. But the 6 Mile House gang continued beating Ross with their fists and with loaded whips. Which
What's a
I had
loaded
no
whip?
idea what a loaded whip was, because a whip, I'm like, what? I looked it up, and apparently loaded whips were shot loaded, and it would make them heavier and like more dangerous. So one
Ouch.
end of the whip was essentially like putting rocks in a sock and beating someone with it, but like with a whip.
I
Oh my
see.
God.
So
I
it would
was-
cause a lot of damage.
I was trying to think
Hardcore.
of some sort of joke like with loaded potato
Right?
skins, but then I just got hungry because I've only had 3 raisins today.
Oh no! Now that you said potato skins, I'm like,
Should we order out?
Mediterranean
about
platter.
that.
We want potato
Like,
skins.
olives? Yeah, now I want potato skins.
I do too. I'm
not
going to
lie.
make those later.
Oh, now I'm thinking of food. I just thought of Taco Bell real quick. Okay, we're moving on. We're moving on. Thought about it. It's a passing thought. It was only after they had beaten the crap out of David Ross with their hands and with loaded whips, and that Lavinia had choked him and thrown him through a clay glass window. It was only after this that he was able to get through that window and just take a run into the woods. That man was running for his life.
He fucked around and he found out.
But he wasn't even done being fucked around with because he ran into the woods. He reached the cover of the tree line and they started firing guns at him on the tree line. And this is the real story. Like, the other one was like the urban legend. This is the real thing. So he managed to make it back to a main road and was crossing Righteous Bridge. Don't know what that is, but I keep thinking of like righteous.
Yeah.
Like, the Righteous Bridge. Apparently it was just outside of proper Charleston. And that's when he spotted the entire gang pursuing him still. And Lavinia shouted, "You damned infernal rascal.
Yeah, she did.
If ever I catch you, I will give you 100 lashes."
I love her a lot.
Which also makes me think, I'm like, was Lavinia the one with the loaded whip?
Yes.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe 6 Mile House was some sort of BDSM dungeon
That's why I'm
situation.
like, what's going on in there? Not to kink shame.
She's wild,
Lavinia,
Yeah, right.
but
That's
what's
what the spikes are
happening?
for.
Yeah, I'm like, is
just
consent involved?
Yeah, but maybe it is. Maybe this is all just some really elaborate role play situation
It
between
could be.
Lavinia and our, what's his name? The running away man?
David
David.
Ross.
David
Running away
Ross.
man.
Sorry. And somebody just saw it all happening.
Yeah.
And then wrote a really loaded piece about how she was some sort of highway
Yeah.
woman, but actually she was just running some sort of innocent BDSM dungeon from
Instead,
6
she
Mile
was just
House.
like a really professional dominatrix.
And she
I
just
could see
stuck
it.
to the plot line.
Hell yeah. She was like, you didn't say a safe word.
And
We're
he's
going with
running
this."
away because he wants it to end, but he can't remember the safe word.
can't.
The safe word is Sheng.
Full
It was
circle.
a hard one to remember. You know, she's
like,
just
I
trying to
haven't
make a
seen
man
that
out of
movie.
him.
It hasn't come out yet.
Damn it. So yeah, she also used the damned infernal rascal, which I'm sure is like the asshole of that day.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like everyone was just like, "Oh, you're such a damned infernal rascal," which doesn't have the same
No.
feel as like you're an asshole. or,
Doesn't
like, a
pack the
douche.
same punch.
Yeah, but yeah, she's gonna give him 100 lashes if he doesn't, or if she catches him. But the group must have kind of given up the chase at some point. She didn't catch him because Ross managed to make it safely back into Charleston that evening to cry in front of the sheriff and be like, "Why did you leave me in front of that house?"
What a baby.
Meanwhile, it was David. You
Yeah.
left David.
What do you
That was
expect?
your own doing.
Ew, David.
Ew, David. So meanwhile, a merchant by the name of John Peoples, which I love that name.
Fun.
Peoples. He was headed out of the city, and my thing just went into black. Okay. Towards Meeting House Road. And when he reached 6 Mile House, John Peoples stopped at the inn. This was after all of this. It was around 11 p.m., and he was just going to rest and water his horse. So, you know, as one does. So once he stopped at the end, he alleged that he and his young companion, who was a young boy, I don't know if it was his son or what, they don't say, they were attacked and robbed by multiple people at 6 Mile House. In his official affidavit, he claims that as he was arguing with his companion over who would get the water bucket for the horses, 9 or 10 persons, among them a tall, stout woman, came out of the
Lavinia.
same house. That was Lavinia. They were armed with clubs, guns, and pistols and immediately made a violent assault on them. So according to Peoples, the woman among them was the most vicious of all of them. That's Lavinia. And was active in beating him, cutting him over the head and eyes with a stick.
Okay.
Like,
So calm down, Lavinia.
Lavinia is... She needs to talk to someone.
She
But
does.
She's like, this is what you paid for.
She's like, I know, she's like, what? It's part of the whole
Say
thing.
the safe word.
But then nobody can remember Shang. But John Peoples and his companion were eventually able to escape the gang and made their way back to the road. I love that they were just attacked while they were watering their horse, and they're like, and they just like run away.
Life was hard back then. We think we have it bad now.
Tough.
Try to water your horse these days.
Just stopping at an inn. But although he wasn't aware of it in that moment, John Peoples was pursued by 2 of the men in the gang to the road. He just didn't know it. And these 2 men rode up on him and the boy who was with him, and they brandished pistols and demanded that they hand over any money or valuables that they had. After searching the man and the boy, the bandits took his pocketbook, and it contained roughly $40, which is a pretty good haul back then, and turned back in the direction of 6 Mile House. So meanwhile, John Peoples and this boy raced back to Charleston and immediately reported the attack to authorities. Although he couldn't positively identify each member of the gang right then and there, John Peoples, quote, had just cause to believe that among them was William Hayward, John Fisher, and his wife Lavinia Fisher, another man named Joseph Roberts, and another man named John Andrews. Lots of Johns, lots of Josephs.
That's what we like to
strong
hear.
names. So author Bruce Orr points out that among the more interesting aspects of the John Peoples affidavit is that the document looks like it was written in the handwriting of a lot of different people. So that's weird.
That is.
And at various different points in the affidavit, his name is spelled Peoples, like Peoples, and Peoples, Peeples.
I wonder why.
So people think this means at least another person was involved in writing that description of events, but they're not sure why. And it's also possible when you really think of history and reality in that time, he might have not had an ability to read and write, so they might have had to have somebody documenting his report.
True.
It's still interesting. He also notes that the list appears to have been added to People's affidavit likely after it had been filed, and it's a list of the people they think were in 6 Mile House. And that was John Fisher, Lavinia Fisher, William Hayward, Joseph Roberts, William Andrews, Seth Young, which I didn't see a Seth in there.
No, I never saw a Seth
Never saw
coming.
that coming.
No, it's like when you watch Game of Thrones and you're just like, why is he called Jamie?
Thank you. You're like,
Why is he called Rob?
Rob. It's Rob.
Tyrion and Rob.
Tyrion, Rob. Cersei, all these really
Jamie.
cool. Daenerys.
Yep.
And it's like, no, just Rob. I do love Rob, though. He's my favorite. So
Yeah, man. Actually, you know what? Fuck John.
Yeah,
in
fuck
that.
John.
Fuck John.
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
I don't get
agree.
enough of that.
I'm a Rob girl.
Yeah, I mean, little hot-headed.
A little bit.
Think about it.
But,
Think
like,
about what
we
you're
really
doing,
like
Rob.
that.
We really loved it. I don't know why.
Such a Rob.
Such a Rob.
Just Rob
thing to
being
do.
Rob.
The Red Wedding was like a real dark moment.
It
in
was
my
a dark
life.
moment.
Wasn't
You're
ready
right.
for
Let's
that.
not upset ourselves
Yeah,
again.
let's not go there. Can't
was
go there
rough.
again. When he says mother, okay.
No, don't go there. Don't go there, we
Can't go
said.
there. I saw it in my head. But it's the way he says it.
And if anyone's complaining about spoilers, that show's like 10 years old.
Yeah, sit down.
Stop
Exactly.
it. Stop
and
it.
all I said was he said mother. Okay. He did love his mom. So we got a Seth. Which is interesting because we got like John, William, Joseph, William, James, John, James,
John.
Seth. So, okay, there he is. Seth does not show up again. I don't think. Seth
Pour one
was,
out
like,
for
of
Seth.
there. Yeah, pour one out for him. So, with sworn affidavits from 2 victims and witnesses, Sheriff Cleary quickly assembled a huge posse of police officers and vigilantes on February 19th, 1819. That's when the group headed out to 6 Mile House. And when they arrived at the end, they surrounded the place, demanded everyone surrender immediately. And that's when they basically were able to search 6 Mile House, and they found that large storage of weapons and powder. So that was all true. So the gang definitely had the means to resist them, but I don't know why they decided not to. I don't know if it was they decided it was too big of a posse to overwhelm, or John Fisher. There is one set of tales, and I kind of believe it because I feel like John Fisher was like a good husband.
Yeah,
weirdly.
he's a John.
He's a John.
He's a John.
We love a John.
We do.
And John Fisher apparently said that he opted to surrender rather than risk injury or death to his wife.
Oh, I believe that.
So he did that for Lavinia, which in the power couple that is John and Lavinia, I feel like that is right.
Believable.
Whatever their reason was, they were arrested without a fight, and the sheriff successfully did get John and Lavinia. They also got James McElroy. They did get Seth Young, but I don't know if he ever comes up again. And they got James Howard. So evidence taken from the home, and this does come back, so don't worry, I'm not just randomly saying it, was a large cowhide, but they didn't own any cows. So they were like, where the hell
That's
did this
troubling.
come from? Yeah, and it was like a recent cowhide, and they were like,
wow.
what's this about? So by the time the gang members were being loaded into the wagon, the scene had attracted a big crowd, obviously, because I always love that in these old-timey cases where it's like this huge crime scene and all these people are just walking through it. They're like, whoa, look at that blood. It's like, ooh, this is nuts. Wow. Like, just like,
I wish you had just seen Alina act that out if you're listening.
like they're all just like taking pieces of like skull fragments off the floor and being like, wow, this was great. Happy Sunday.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, just walking through it. So a man named Stephen Lacoste, who was a neighbor of 6 Mile House, went in there and he saw this cowhide and he said, motherfuckers, that's my cow.
Oh,
And
no.
my cow had gone missing.
Oh, no.
So they had stolen this man's cow.
And
That's a
killed
hangable
it.
offense for sure.
Shitty. I was like, damn.
Stealing a cow. That's
Justice
like,
for Stephen.
That's big business
That
back
is.
I'm saying.
justice for Stephen.
Not cool.
then. Was that the horse's name?
Stephen. So rather than leaving the scene as it was or coming back later to search it more, they just set it on fire.
Easy.
What else
know,
are you going to do?
Well, that seemed to be working well for them.
So it was burned to the ground. And a few days after their arrest, or a somewhat more thorough search of the grounds around the area was made, which I love that they burned the place down and they were like, we should go back there and look to see if there's any evidence.
It's really cleared out all the clutter, though.
Yeah, it really took care of
we
stuff.
made it easier.
Made it sanitary. And at least 2 bodies were indeed found buried near the house,
No
like
way.
right on the property. One was the body of a male who'd been shot, and the other was the skeletal remains of a woman who'd been buried in an unmarked grave at least 2 years earlier.
Don't love
Neither of
that.
them were ever identified.
Oh, wow.
Oh, good.
There was at least 2 there. And the members of this 6 Mile House gang were taken to the city jail, which was apparently only a small step up from like medieval dungeons. At the time. There was no running water. There was no bed or toilet. Instead, there was a pile of wood chips where they were like, that's your bed and your toilet.
Oh, wow.
So have fun with that. And apparently, if you were a violent offender, you were just shackled to a steel ring that was in the middle of the floor. And if you stepped out of line, you got the shit kicked out of you. So that's fun. And they said that it was also not unusual for a corpse to reach an advanced state of decomposition before being removed from a cell. So
You don't
it's
want to do
great
it
in
any
there.
sooner.
You don't want to go to the city jail. So at the time of John and Lavinia's arrest, South Carolina still operated under a colonial justice system. So this system was based on a mix of biblical edicts and laws imposed by the British Crown.
No thanks.
Oh.
Thanks a lot, guys. So as such, the crimes of which the gang were accused, highway robbery, were considered a capital offense, and that made all members eligible for the death penalty. So by February 22nd, the sheriff had also arrested gang member James Sterrett, which would bring the total arrested to 7. Some more arrests would come later. By the end of the week, I think there was about 9 people that were arrested from that house that were in the gang. And once they'd all been rounded up, they were all brought before John Peoples, and he identified them all as the ones who violently attacked them and robbed them.
Imagine that.
So looking at their previous crimes that they'd been punished for, both John and Lavinia had previously been arrested for theft, which, at least for John, he had received 30 lashes for it. James Sterrett had also been convicted of theft on one occasion, and he had been branded as his punishment.
Oh, wow.
And Joseph Roberts had had a piece of his ear chopped off
That'll
for
teach ya.
theft as well.
I'm
So-
still not totally convinced these people weren't just taking part in some elaborate BDSM situation and they all loved
It
it.
sounded more and more like
It really is.
to be quite honest. On March 23rd, 1819, John and Lavinia, as well as William Hayward and Joseph Roberts, were brought before Judge Hall Bay, and they were going to determine whether there was enough evidence to convict them. At least of assaulting David Ross, because remember David, poor Shang. The judge said there was enough evidence, and he set bond for all the individual members, but only Hayward and Roberts managed to post bail. So Roberts got out, but he didn't do well with his immediate freedom, because 2 days later he was again arrested for threatening the life of a local butcher. The same butcher that the gang sold the meat that belonged to the cow found in the outbuilding at 6 Mile House
Dun,
that
dun,
belonged to the neighbor that they
dun.
had the cowhide for.
Full freaking circle.
Same.
That's so satisfying.
I'm
though.
so impressed with how you did that all in a row.
I was just really intense on that subject. I was like, it's really mean that you stole his cow and then you killed it, you sold its meat, and you kept its hide. That's not cool. So the trial began on May 10th, 1819, and that's where John, Lavinia, William, Joseph, and James were all indicted for assault with intent to murder David Ross. The Attorney General's document said the gang, quote, were said to have wielded, pointed, and fired a loaded weapon at David Ross with the intent to kill him. I agree. By the time the hearing concluded on the 27th, through various methods, a lot of the gang either skipped town, were either to escape, or somehow got off the indictment. I'm not really sure how. It left really only John and Lavinia on the hook for the whole crime.
Oh, no.
Excellent.
So the trial was drawing huge crowds, and the couple was found guilty on both assault with intent to murder and common assault on David Ross.
Damn.
So on June 2nd, they were brought before Judge Charles Jones Colcock for sentencing. Pause for reaction. However, the sentencing part then got moved to the Constitutional Court at the last second. This is so complicated.
It is.
So now it was going to be held, and it wasn't going to be held until the conclusion of the trial. And unfortunately for John and Lavinia, the Constitutional Court wouldn't be back in session until January. And it was
Holy shit.
June. So the couple was going to be held at the city jail where you pee where you sleep and you might die and rot in there.
And this had been going on like almost a year at this point.
Yeah. And in the meantime, William Hayward had been recaptured in South Carolina. And because he was tried and convicted in absentia, so while he wasn't there, he was returned to Charleston to await with the Fishers. So the gang's all getting back together, you know,
Yay.
which is nice.
Reunited.
And as a husband and wife, John and Lavinia were held in the same cell. So that's
That's sweet.
nice.
Precious.
But they were on the ground floor initially, and
Ooh.
that was like the really bad floor to be on.
Is
Rats.
everything dripping
Yeah.
It's
through
all
onto you?
dripping.
Oh,
There's no ventilation. It's
Yeah,
just
we don't
not good.
love.
So Lavinia used her wiles to get them moved to the debtors section of the prison, which was on a higher floor. The cells were much bigger, not a lot of infectious diseases floating around. So they were allowed to do that. And weirdly, the debtors section was also where Joseph Roberts, another member of the gang, was serving his sentence for threatening the butcher. So they were all reunited again in the cell. And that's
Yay.
nice. So on the evening of September 13th, John and Joseph actually managed to dig a hole under the wall of one of the cell windows, large enough for them to fit through. And using a rope made of blankets they tied together, they climbed down the wall.
Damn.
Joseph Roberts went out, and then he got there. John was going down, and the blanket rope snapped. So he
Oh.
fell 20 feet to the ground below. And now Lavinia couldn't escape.
Good.
So she's just
So-
sitting there with a giant hole in
She's
the
like,
wall.
that sucks. Awesome.
She's like, I actually don't know anything about this.
She's like, we didn't want to go with the ladies first. In here, okay. So they were like, oh no, that sucks. And then they just ran away.
Bye.
They just ran away. No one noticed until the next morning. That's when the governor issued a proclamation offering a $500 reward for their recapture. The sheriff didn't have to look very far. They weren't really smart. I don't think this was really going a whole. And again, this is another case of John being a really good husband.
Even though he
Because-
left Lavinia.
Well, don't you worry though, because their original plan was to escape and travel by boat to Cuba, obviously.
Oh, duh.
But John refused to leave Lavinia behind.
See?
So he and Roberts had stayed close to the jail to try to come up with a plan for how to get Lavinia out.
Okay, fine.
Love.
So he got himself caught that way. A few days after their escape, they were visiting a local grocer, which I'm also like, guys, what are you doing? Like,
Hungry.
you're wanted convicts. The local grocer was like, hi, John and Rob. Like, what's
Aren't
going
you
on?
supposed to be in jail?
And he immediately called Sheriff Cleary and was like, hi, I have them here.
Wow, what a rat.
Yeah, so on the evening of September 16th, the sheriff found them hiding under an overturned boat.
Oh,
Oh
no.
my God.
Which is similar to how they found the Boston
I was
bomber.
gonna
That was my immediate
say.
thought.
Shokar Tsarnaev, they found him in a boat.
Yeah, yeah.
That they just shot at a bunch of times.
Can we say
they-
full circle? We haven't brought them up
There
yet,
we
but
are.
we're in Boston.
Yeah, you know, full circle.
So there we go. And they were both returned to the city jail. They were going to have to wait for that constitutional court in January. So on January 17th, 1820, John and Lavinia appeared before the constitutional court. They figured they were going to be sentenced for those assaults, and that's it. But as they got there, the prosecutor was like, hey, you're also going to be sentenced for highway robbery. And they were like, wait, though, that's a capital offense and we will die. And they were like, that sucks.
Don't know what to tell ya.
So, and it was on John Peoples. That's what they were. They were now bringing that in at like the 9th hour. So they ended up being sentenced to hang on February 4th, 1820. In the week following their sentence, John and Lavinia had petitioned several clergymen and notable Charlestonians, just asking to intervene on their behalf because they were being sentenced for something they were not tried and convicted of.
Yeah.
Even if they did it, they didn't have a fair trial. So they claimed they wanted an opportunity for repentance and for time to prepare to meet their God. And so they wanted a reprieve, at least. The governor granted the reprieve, but the order only pushed the date back to like February 18th.
Oh,
so
shit.
I think it was like a few days. Now, while John and Lavinia waited for execution, they spent a lot of time preparing for death and what comes next with various clergymen. John, like the original story, apparently welcomed this. He was like very intensely praying. But Lavinia definitely legitimately was not interested in this. She was more worried about just saving herself. She was like, I would really like just to live through this and not prepare for what comes next. So they said when she engaged in prayer, Lavinia would jump at any moment or noise by her captors. She was convinced they were coming to her with a pardon. So she was totally convinced she was getting pardoned out of this.
Damn.
And she was very confident that they would not, one, execute her for a crime she had never been convicted of, and two, execute a woman. Unfortunately, she was wrong.
Dun, dun, dun.
Because, yeah. But at the time, I will say, contrary to what like legends will tell you, many residents of Charleston really believed Lavinia was innocent of at least that crime. And they were actually advocating for her release.
Wow.
Which is wild. But this got more intense when a local man was arrested for an unrelated crime and allegedly confessed to the highway robbery of John Peoples.
Ooh.
Which is okay. But he's, I don't know
That
how
was the
that
sheriff's
works.
reaction to
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay. My guy. But I'm like, didn't John Peoples say there was like a whole gang of people who came at him? And
Yeah.
this guy's like, I did it though. But apparently the man was able to identify the exact amount of money that had been stolen from John Peoples.
Okay.
And was
suspect.
also being able to say other elements of the crime that he probably wouldn't know if he wasn't there. So maybe he was part of the mob at least. Regardless of the confession, though, the governor refused to extend the reprieve, and in fact, he left the city just to avoid any negative press. He was like, I know this guy says that he did it, and we never actually tried you or convicted you for this, but I'm going to go on vacation. Godspeed. See you later.
Honestly,
Like,
how on the nose is that, though?
damn, like, just, he's like, I'm out.
Yeah, he was like, I'm going to go
Bye.
on vacation with my family.
Yeah, that's like in the Jack the Ripper case. When he was just like, well, I'm out. I'm going to go to Sweden. See you guys later. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I hope you guys catch up. See ya.
Good luck.
I mean, it is one way to deal with all of your problems.
Just
Just
to
leave.
Sweden.
Just leave.
There you go. So now they were going to be killed for crimes that they were very sketchily associated with, and they weren't even tried for. But there were bodies found on their property. So, like, this is kind of mayhem.
Yeah.
Like, in all ways. You're like, they did do some bad stuff.
They
I'm
stole a
pretty
cow.
Sure they stole
Yeah.
and killed a cow.
Yeah, so fuck them.
Sold the meat. And then they did. 2 people died on their property at the very least.
And one of them was shot, so like,
One of them was shot.
yeah.
Just saying. So when February 18th arrived, caskets for the Fishers were selected. So beautiful. And the hangman was measuring the length of rope when John and Lavinia were led from the city jail to the gallows. And apparently, it is true that when Lavinia saw the hangman measuring the rope that was going to be used to hang her with, she shrieked in terror, her cry chilling every heart with horror. Which, yeah.
Yeah,
So
that'll
the-
do it.
They were presented in the town square before they went to the gallows, and they were covered in loose white garments together. Apparently, it's like a smock thing. I don't know why they would do it. But they were given one final opportunity to say goodbye, and at this moment, they fell into each other's arms.
Ruin me.
I know.
Like,
I know.
wow.
They begged the hangman to spare their lives, but the hangman was indifferent to their suffering.
Oh.
And he was apparently very aggressive and, like, manhandled them
Well,
both.
he's a hangman.
Yeah, that's you have to have that job. But once John and Lavinia had gone on the had gone on the wagon, they made their way to the gallows. Huge crowds are following them. It's like a parade. And when they arrived, John climbed the scaffold without incident, but Lavinia refused to move from her spot at the bottom of the stairs. She had to be carried up on the platform. Once there, she called out to the crowd, apparently with her arms outstretched, asking them to save her.
Wow.
They all literally were like,
Nah.
like, it was like that, like blink, 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 just crickets. So then she began cursing them and blaspheming, apparently.
Blaspheme them, girl.
Yeah, they're not helping you.
Yeah.
So finally, the Reverend asked John whether he had any final words, and John decided to address the crowd, and he begged forgiveness for those he had ever offended. And he also claimed his and Lavinia's innocence. They both embraced one final time. The sacks went over their heads. Signal from the sheriff. Down they go. The press reports that Lavinia, quote, died without a struggle or a groan. and that John unfortunately wasn't so lucky, and it was some minutes before he expired and ceased to struggle.
Ouch.
Yeah. So just after 2 p.m. on February 18th, 1820, John and Lavinia Fisher were pronounced dead. He was only 29,
Oh my
and she was
God.
28.
Oh my God, I was picturing like people who were like 50.
Me
Yeah,
too.
Me too.
For real.
They were young. So John and Lavinia Fisher were members of a gang of thieves. That much is true. Lavinia Fisher was definitely not America's first female serial killer.
By any means.
No.
It's possible she never killed anyone. It's possible she did kill someone. In truth, the only crime they really acknowledged committing was robbing and beating David Ross. Which,
And David had it coming.
You know, he's
Yeah.
not Shang. So. But the legend grew nonetheless. And in the years following their execution, John and Lavinia Fisher's story became a media tale of just murder and mayhem. It was huge in the Penny Dreadful publications and pamphlets. They really took it and ran with it. In 1830, a man named Peter Nielsen published a book where he claimed to have been in Charleston at the time of the arrest. And he said the Fishers had been robbing and killing for years. And according to Bruce Orr, Nielsen claimed, quote, "On digging around this den of iniquity, a great number of skeletons were found, no doubt the remains of unfortunate travelers." So people still claimed that there was tons of skeletons in that house.
Body, oddies.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Exactly. And actually, in the latter part of the 19th century, Lavinia's skeleton was exhumed from her coffin in a potter's field and put on display at the Charleston Museum so everyone could see the remains of the only woman to have been hanged in South Carolina.
Shit.
Wow.
They were occasionally, I loved this because when I read it, I was like, what does that mean? Because it says they were occasionally removed from their display for being out of order.
Like Lavinia was out of order?
Out of order. I was
Oh,
like,
wow.
did she need a tune-up? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, I don't know about
Out
all
of
that.
order.
Oh.
But as of as late as 1922, they were still on display.
Holy shit.
Yeah. And they were, at that point, they were definitely not just like a band of like bandits. She was the first female serial killer
I
at that
see.
point.
I
That's what they were touting her as.
Wow.
Who had like hundreds of bones in her cellar.
You got to
No.
get those punters in.
Right. You got to. And I think part of this story is definitely she was a woman. So it's exaggerated because female criminals of her caliber were definitely not common. Even of her real caliber were not common. Her arrest and story definitely became a huge interest at the time and even now. And in the 19th century, many of, if not most people, believed that women were incapable of violence of any kind, never mind murder. So Lavinia was just something like new and fascinating, I think. And so the legend just got a life of its own. But there is always moral lessons and like social lessons in urban legends.
Don't steal someone's cow.
That's what I took from this. But this story, people like to say, is that this is telling you what is and isn't acceptable of a woman at the time. It's very clear that they were trying to be like, look at the consequences for stepping out of your normal, like, you should be at home popping out babies and like cooking dinner. You're going to get hanged. Like, that's essentially what it was. And finally, there is the convenient fact that the legendary account of Lavinia Fisher's monstrous killing spree and being the serial killer, it justifies a lot of problematic elements of the real story. The legend kind of makes law enforcement and the justice system at the time like, they swept in and they just took care of like heinous crimes and we took these people off the streets. So they were painting them as these vicious, violent killers. So it kind of also justifies this execution that was probably not justified at the time. Because they were not tried for this crime, and who even knows if they committed it. But according to Bruce Orr, the government had actually been hoping to secure the land that 5 Mile House and 6 Mile House sat on.
Oh, so we know exactly what
And it was
happened.
going to build a new naval base.
No wonder they were burning all that shit down.
Exactly. That was actually the government.
I'm saying. So the execution of the Fishers and William Hayward, who owned 5 Mile House, by the way, that would have cleared the property for the state to do whatever the hell they wanted to do with it without having to jump through any hoops or be
fucked
denied. And that is the story of Lavinia Fisher.
That's bonkers.
6 Mile House.
Well done.
Thank you.
That was outstanding.
It's like a
Crazy.
twisty-turny, like what really happened.
And I love that we started with some sort of highwayman robber situation.
Hell yeah.
Then we transmitted into some sort of BDSM dungeon.
Exactly.
And then we ended up with government corruption.
That's what I always like to travel through.
Via the Chinese Empire.
Which, who saw that coming?
You got bingo.
It's a weird tale.
That was
crazy.
amazing. I can't believe I'd never heard of that. And I'm going to go look into this and the bloody
Yeah,
benders.
no, I've made a mental note. Yeah.
Super interesting.
And you
We're
guys should look into
definitely-
Sawney Bean. It's
Oh,
not real,
yeah.
but it is quite fun.
But
I wanna look
interesting.
it is
nonetheless.
interesting. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we have to just get you to come to London so we can
Hell
show you
yeah.
all the
Yes.
grisly sides.
yes, please.
Yeah, we can take you to the Clink.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I need all of
Please.
it.
We're
There's
filled.
also
We're filled
there's
with
a
shit.
bar in Shoreditch that used to be a prison, and I probably can't go because my ex-boyfriend works there, but we'll send you there. And it's all of the like little booths downstairs are old cells.
Oh, that is so fucking
I
cool.
love that.
It is very
so
cool.
many things.
We'll
That's
put you in
so
disguise
cool.
so you can come with us.
There you go. I love that.
Well, that was
We're
amazing.
coming.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you for
listen
being
to this
here.
great story.
This
Anytime.
is so fun.
That
and now
was
we
great.
get to do another one with you.
Exactly. So we're going to do one now. And ours is witchy.
Oh, hell yeah.
It is very English.
love.
Like
The most.
extra rural, rural,
Rural
and
jurors.
very similar time period. We're going for 1875.
Oh my gosh, perfect.
I love an
So
1800s.
very,
Take
very
me there.
like, perfectly matched.
Hell
so
yeah.
yes, over on the Red-Handed feed now, we will take you witchy, olden timey, 1875 story. I can't promise we go to the Chinese Empire, but we do all sorts of things.
We'll figure out a way to
Work it
get
in.
there.
Yeah.
Shang will work his way in there. And guys, head over there.
Let's go.
We'll meet you there.
Pull your car over, switch feeds.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's go. And yeah.
Come hang out with us at Red-Handed.
Yes.
Hell yeah. We're going to be there, guys.
So check us out there.
And we hope you keep listening.
And we hope you
Keep
it
weird. But not so weird that you steal somebody's cow, because I just don't really like
that
that.
was really the shittiest part of the story.
Yeah, I'm really fixated on that. Bye.